All right, everybody. This is the notes for week 2, algebra 13 or financial algebra 13th to 17th. So this is the last new section we're going to do. If you're taking a look at the notes, example 1 is basically just talking about how to set up and use the checkoff charts. Now, the checkoff charts, if you look at the notes, it should be pretty straightforward. You'll see that there's a chart, obviously, that goes all the way across by month. January, February, March, April, May, it keeps on going. And basically, on the left-hand side, it's just a list of bills. It could be for anything. Rent, mortgage or car payment, car insurance, food cost, electricity. And basically, every month that you have something, you just put a check in there. How many months you pay it, or so on and so forth. The second sample A is just a bunch of checks for which months do you pay bills. Example, there's sample B is the same thing, but instead of just saying check marks for which months you pay it, you put how much you actually have to pay. So for example, if your rent in January is $450, and that's the same for every month, you'd put $450 for every single month because you have to pay your rent every month. Car payment. Let's say your car payment's $200 and you have to pay it every month. Let's say your gym membership's $100, but you pay it every other month. So you might pay it in January, but then you might not pay it again until March, and you pay it every other month. So basically, all these checkoff charts are doing is visually giving you a representation of which months do you pay bills and how much do you pay. So if they were asking us questions like, they said, which month do we pay the most bills? Well, if we had 6 check marks in one row, and that was the most, then that would be the biggest month. If they said how much money spent in the most month, then you'd have to look down at the bottom one where there's money. But the questions on these should be pretty straightforward. How many times do you pay your health insurance per year? Count your checks, it's 4 times. How many times do you pay how much do you pay for each health insurance? Then you have to look for the price. $450 a month was your health care from the notes, so $1,800 for the year. How often do you buy prescriptions? Basically, everything you should be able to figure out in example 1 is strictly from making a sample checkoff chart of either using the checks for just what they are when you pay them, or the money, how much you actually pay each month. You should be able to use that for your checkoff chart for example 1. All right, financial algebra, here's a video for example 2. Now, example 2, basically in example 1, you had to make your checkoff charts for how much money you spent each bill, and then you sectioned it off by months. Well, example 2 says, now we're going to use our monthly totals from our sample B checkoff chart, and we're going to actually make a bar graph. Now, you've probably seen bar graphs before, and you've made them before at some point in your math career. But basically, when you make a chart, the bar graph, you want to make an axis that is a vertical. The vertical goes up. We're going to put our money. This is a dollar symbol there. Money, and then on the bottom, months. And there's 12, obviously, January, February, March. And basically, this is pretty straightforward stuff. What they're going to do is they're going to have us add up all the totals from example 1. So, for example, January's bills were $230. So if these are going by hundreds over here, 300, 500, so on. The first month's January was 230. So you'd go up not quite halfway to 230. There's January. All you're doing is basically making bars for each month. February goes up to 120. So February is barely over 100, 120. That's February. And you're going to basically just keep doing this. March goes up to 480, almost 500. March, January, February, March, April. So you basically just add up the totals. Once again, you're getting all of these values. This is the total monthly amount for bills. So if you look at your sample B that had the dollar signs from example 1 in it, add them all up for January, add them all up. February, add them all up. And then you're basically just going to keep going. So March was 480, April was 420. So it's going to be a little lower than this one went up to like 480. This guy's like 420, so he's going to be a little bit below. March. That's April. And you're going to basically just keep on going, making bars. Once you're done making the bars, then they could ask us questions. Like they could say, which month had the highest total? All you'd have to do is figure out, like if you had a bar that was obviously over here that was way taller, and they said, which month had the most? You would go to wherever the tallest bar was. That month had the highest payment because it's got the biggest bar. If it said, well, how much was the total in September, you'd have to actually go over to month September. Let's say September was over there. You'd have to go to September, and then you have to basically try to guess, oh, it's going to be in the amount of money over there. So you can use these charts really straightforward to find out how much each bill is if you just follow it over to the side, or just by judging which ones had the most. Example 2. All right, financial algebra, example 3. Example 3, we're talking about pie charts. Now, you guys have dealt with these before. The first thing, if you look at the notes, I drew some pie graphs and colored them in. This pie graph all the way around is 100% or 360 degrees, but we're going to use percents. It's 100%. So if you cut something down the middle and cut it in half, that would represent 50%. Basically, example 3, all they're telling us to do is they're giving us some amounts, and they just want us to use our best judgment to create pieces of pie that are close. So for example, it says household is 40%. Well, if all the way down is 50%, then I'm not going to go all the way. If 50% is all the way down, I'm going to maybe go right about there. I'm going to call that 40%. 50% would go all the way down halfway. So I'm going to make it about right there. 40% household. Looks good. Then they said education. Education was 25%. 25%. Okay, so if half is down, 25% would be half of half. So it should be like 1/4 or one piece of the pie. So I'm going to basically make like a piece of pie right here. And that's like 1/4 of the thing. So that's pretty close. It doesn't have to be perfect. It can't be, obviously it should be half of halfway. So you can make it even using the other side. That'd be okay. See, transportation, 15%. Okay, so if halfway is 25%, and then we cut that in half, 12.5, this is 15%. So I'm going to go a little bit bigger. I'm going to call that 15% right there for transportation. Then we had 5% for health. Health, 5%. We had another 5% for miscellaneous. And then that last is about double of those, which is the 10%, which was for savings. So when you're making your pie graphs, just do your best to average your percents. If you actually wanted to get exact and use a protractor to make degree measures, we could using 360 degrees. But for what we're doing, we really just want to estimate. Make sure if it's less than 50%, it can't cover up half the pie. If it's less than 25%, it can't be like 1/4 of the pie. So you could just play around with their percents and make your own. Should be pretty good. See ya. All right, financial algebra. This is now example 4 from the notes. So example 4, they give you the pie chart. So we looked at the pie chart on the example 3, and we talked about the percents. If it's 50, if it's in a line down the middle, it's 50% and so on. So example 4, they tell you the percents in the problem. They show you 35%, 40%. They show you all the percents in the picture. So if you look at all those percents, this time they want us to actually figure out how much money that is. So they told us that her monthly budget is $4,000. So if we know $4,000 is the monthly budget, we have to figure out what's 35% for the house, 10% auto, mortgage, miscellaneous, and savings. So these are all different percents. So remember, from this year, we've talked about it. It's 35%. We have to change it to a decimal, our 2 decimal thing. Move it over, 0.35 times, because we're finding 35% of 4,000. Remember from our word problems, of is times. So 0.35 times 4,000 means $1,400 is her household stuff. That's how much she's spending for the household. Autos, 10%. 10% of 4,000 is $400. That's how much they're spending. That could be car payment and gas and car insurance, whatever, all together. House mortgage, 40%. That's $1,600 towards the mortgage for the house. 5% miscellaneous. Remember, it's not 0.5. 0.5 is 50%. 0.05, 2 decimal places. 0.05 times 4,000, $200. Miscellaneous. That could be going out to dinner or whatever, buying her special stuff. 10% savings. 10%, 0.10 times 4,000 would be $400. So these are the monthly costs. And if you ever want to know if you're right, add them up. if you add up all of what we just figured out, it makes $4,000. It's got to match the monthly budget. So remember, if they give you a percent, change the percent to a decimal times the monthly budget. That's how you can find those amounts. Then you can use these total amounts to make a bar graph. So if you had household, it would go up to $1,400. So then you can make each one of them. Let me show you what the final picture for those should look like. So if you take a look, then household goes up. Then you've got auto. The mortgage was the highest payment, $1,600, miscellaneous, and the savings. So you can use the percents to figure out the dollar values. You can use the dollar values to help you make a bar graph, and you can find exact amounts. Example 4. Good job, guys.